Ancient Rome was a powerful empire. It seemed invincible, yet it fell. Learn the sobering warning that the collapse of Rome declares to America today. Next, on The Key of David with Gerald Flurry.
Greetings, everyone. In 1975, Herbert W. Armstrong led his church to print a book called The Modern Romans. And historians were quoted, many of them, and outstanding historians like Edward Gibbon, and they talked about why the Roman Empire fell. So it was so great. Why did it fall? Well, there are lessons from that fall that we still have not learned today. I want to get to a scripture here very quickly in 2 Chronicles 7, verse 14. And before I read that verse, though, I'll just say this. These lessons that have not been learned are very much extant in America and Britain today. And we have many serious problems, and yet God says there is a solution. There is a solution. So we have in the early part of the empire anyhow, they had Romans that looked at all of the economic prosperity and the military successes, winning almost all of their wars, and they thought, well, that empire can never fall. But then later on, there was a Roman statesman, Seneca, who warned, well, yes, this Roman Empire is going to fall. And he just looked at the problems that were there and what they were doing and told them why in certain ways. And people at the time Seneca said that, they snickered at what he said. They laughed at him, scoffed at him. So I want to read this scripture to you from the last book of the Old Testament, 2 Chronicles 7 and verse 14, but also I'll just mention 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 11 where the Apostle Paul says, well, look, those examples in the Old Testament are examples to admonish us and direct us and keep us from making such horrible mistakes. And that is a critical verse to be sure. Verse 14 of 2 Chronicles 7. Here's what it says, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. This is a magnificent promise from God, that if you will do what I tell you here, that I will heal your land. What a wonderful achievement that would be and miracle that would be if God were to do that. And He says He will if we do what He says and turn from our own way. Do we believe God? Do you and I believe God? Do we mean, do we really think what He's saying is true? Do we have enough faith in God to believe Him? Notice this quote from one of those great historians, Philip Van Ness Myers wrote, Rome, its rise and fall. He said this, first at the bottom, as it were, of Roman society, forming its ultimate unit, was the family. The most important feature or element of this family group was the authority of the father. It would be difficult to overestimate the influence of this group upon the history and destiny of Rome. It was the cradle of at least some of the splendid virtues of the early Romans that contributed so much to the strength and greatness of Rome and that helped to give dominion of the world. Dominion of the world. Now, where you talk about just having dominion of the whole world, I mean the whole world. That's quite a power. And what happened here when they began to fall? if you look at the family structure, even in America and Britain, those great empires, and you'd have to say that each one of those empires, well, the epitome of each one's power in the beginning was a strong family structure. And many historians tell you that. That isn't something that's a secret. He goes on with his quote here: the exercise of the parental authority in the family taught the Roman how to command as well as how to obey. And how to exercise authority and wisdom and moderation and justice. Now that's a powerful statement. Just through the family structure, you learn how to command, you learn how to lead, and you learn how to obey. Certainly, though, unless you're commanded to disobey God, you don't do that. But what a powerful example families were in the beginning of these great empires and great nations. Almost always you find that to be true, and especially in the nations called Israel. Tacitus, a Roman historian of the early Roman Empire, wrote, "In the good old days of the Republic, every man's son born in wedlock was brought up not in the chamber of some hireling nurse, but in his mother's lap, and at her knee, and that mother would have no higher praise than that she managed the house and gave herself to her children." Well, how about that? Religiously and with the utmost delicacy, she regulated not only the serious task of her youthful charges, but their recreations and also their games. So she directed all of their activities that were critical, and to her and to the husband, it was repugnant to have hirelings come in and rear their children. Now, that's the way it was in early Rome. You can make your own judgment about that, but all of these historians write about it and tell you this is this was like they lead off. This is the foundational mistake that caused Rome to fall. This is the root of it all. Or the roots, I should say. The roots. And then, of course, shortly after that, well, they began to have marriage problems and a lot of divorces, and the men and the women, or the husband and the wife, would begin to let down in their morals. They began to slide down. But again, this was all the roots of the Roman character. This is where the roots of it. And would you say America and Britain and other nations of Israel have this problem today? I think it's something we need to look at carefully. Of course, the historians go on to say that it got so bad that it was just upside down, where the children were actually governing the adults. It was that bad. So the historians say. And the bad part about that is that, according to Jerome Carcopino, he said they just had the children spoiled, and they lost all sense of discipline in the family. The family fell apart, and so did the empire. That's what happened. Now, if you looked at the early part of the empire, it was rare to even see a divorce, because everything was revolving around the family, and divorce became normal. So you just had an epidemic of them, all kinds of divorces. And again, if you look into today's modern education, you'd have to say that educators lead the way in moral and sexual revolutions. That certainly has been something we've seen in this country. I think you would agree with that. But educators will often tell you that, look, we're not a character building institution. But I'm telling you, we have a college here in Edmond, Oklahoma, and one in Stratford, England. We do consider ourselves absolutely a character building institution. And it makes for a strong church, it makes for a strong nation, it makes for a strong individual. How critical that is. Even many of your great quarterbacks you'll find that they had a strong father figure that helped them really grow up in a right way, certainly with discipline. And it really did pay off in their lives. That they were rewarded for that structure of the family. Here's another quote, this one from J.P. Baldwin. And he said, to a Roman of the best days of the Republic, religion represented stability in the state. We're talking about religion. But religion represented stability in the state and in the home. It was the foundation of public and private life. For the vast majority of ordinary men, Christianity caused no fundamental change of attitude. That is, in the latter days of the Roman Empire. It didn't change anybody's attitude. It wasn't impacting the people. What went wrong? Well, they weren't getting direction from the church. Is that also true today? Well, we'd better look closely at that because everything's at stake. And I mean everything. If you look at this, here's a quote from Look magazine. That's in the family of Time magazine. And in the past has had a powerful presence in this country. But here's a quote from Look magazine. We are adrift without answers. We are witnessing the death of the old morality. No single authority rules our conduct. No church lays down the moral law for all. Now that's a quote from Look magazine in the early 60s. What do we think of that? I think that's an accurate statement from Look magazine. I think it's something we should discuss, and they talked quite a lot about the meaning of life. They're just simply, in religion, there still was not something really meaningful there or a real purpose in life. And they weren't getting what they once got from the churches. Has that happened to us? Well, I think we need to look at that very closely. But I'll tell you this. There is a way, you see, to know about God's plan and God's holy day plan. If we have a booklet, Holidays or God's Holy Days Which, that tells you about God's plan and how He's working it all out. And all of our literature is free. If you'd like to have that booklet, please request it. Also, the book on Mystery of the Ages tells you about why man doesn't understand and know God in the Bible. It really tells you things that you don't often hear. And those books and booklets will prove that. Other books and booklets I'll maybe offer before this is over. But notice 2 Timothy 3. This is in the New Testament, and verses 1 through 4. Let me read that to you. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents. Well, this is Paul about 2,000 years ago telling us that we'd have children that are disobedient to parents. Is that true? I certainly think it is in America and Britain, the Jewish state in the Middle East, in many ways, and the other nations of Israel. It is true. There are 12 nations of Israel. We talk about that in our book on the United States and Britain in Prophecy and explain all this to you about Israel. Verse 3 says, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good. They don't like people that are good. They hate them. Traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. Wow. Is that talking about us? That we love pleasures more than we love God? We love sports, all these many sports, and nobody's organized sports more than America, I believe, ever in the world. I think that's pretty obvious. But is it good? With all of these sports and all of these pleasures that we have, entertainment, drugs, all of these things. Well, we certainly teach our students to obey these rules that God lays down in the Bible, and even laws, of course. Verse 5, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. Well, you mean religion doesn't have the power to change people's attitude? As I quoted before, that was a problem with Rome when they were decaying and falling. Notice what it says there. A form of godliness. It's just form. It's more of a ritual. There is no power in it. God says if you get this right and you're obeying Him, He will empower you. He will give you individual power, collective power. That's explicit in your Bible. If you just read it, even in a surface way, you'll see that. So God promises that He'll do His work through His church, and He'll give them power, and He'll give them open doors, and they'll be able to overcome their sins and their problems and their difficulties, and they'll have strong families and strong religion. They'll have the very power of God if they're obeying God. And you can see that. You can see it. Here's a quote from Edward Gibbon, the famous Edward Gibbon, a historian that we have today that is one of the best we've ever had. And he talked about in the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, he said, from morning to evening, careless of the sun or the rain, the spectators, who sometimes amounted to the number of 400,000. The giant Circus Maximus in Rome seated that many people. 400,000 for all of their sports and their races. And it got to a lot of violence, killing people even. And it said they got so much into their games and that their happiness, the happiness of Rome, would depend on whether or not their team won. Their happiness depended upon that. And look at all the sports we have today and all the pleasures that are available to us just everywhere you look. And these great historians are saying, look, this is significant. And I'm just quoting historians here and the Bible. But has there ever been a nation more organized in their sports than America? I don't believe so. Is that good? Look, I love this country and I love our people, but I really see things I don't approve of, and I think you can prove from your Bible that it's not good for the nation or the nations. See, their happiness depended upon some sports team winning. They loved pleasures more than they loved God. That's what Paul was talking about. And then they got into, of course, they said, well, we'll have unrestricted trade, and yet they couldn't compete with the cheap foreign labor, and they had to begin to put high tariffs up and subsidize their own workers, subsidize them. And it got so bad that they were subsidizing something like a third to 50% of their, and maybe all of their welfare. And they had to subsidize them, and of course that caused them to begin to have all kinds of inflation and other problems, that they couldn't compete. and they had welfare galore. Just the people would just stay home. They loved staying home, and it was an easy life. They liked that. And do we see any of that in our country? And they would talk. These historians like Daniel Mannix said that these people would, in their sports, they'd know every detail of some game that happened, but they didn't know their Bibles, and weren't ashamed if they didn't, but they were really ashamed if they didn't know about their sports team. At least they made sure they were an expert on that. Well, the Caesars just they just exhausted themselves trying to give their people more pleasures and more opportunities for things like that so they'd be happy. And we've never seen anything like it in this world until now. It is amazing. The charioteers were in those races were paid enormous salaries, as other athletes were, just as they are today. That doesn't mean it necessarily is evil, but if you look at the whole picture, something is not right here. And something very dangerous is going on. Empires fall because of these problems. I want to read a statement by Abraham Lincoln, and many people believe he's our greatest president. Here's what Abraham Lincoln said. We have been the recipients of the choicest bounties of heaven. We have been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. We have grown in numbers, wealth, and power as no other nation has ever grown. But we have forgotten God. We have forgotten God. That's the problem. And so he went ahead and declared a day to confess our national sins and to pray for clemency and forgiveness. And Thursday, the 30th of April, 1863, was declared a day of national humiliation, fasting, and prayer. Well, can you imagine that happening today from a president of the United States? Can you imagine that? We have forgotten God. And he declared this day and encouraged a lot of people to really pray and fast to God. And you know what? God saved them from the Civil War, and they didn't split up the nation, which was what the plan was in many ways, and it could have become 2 nations or 3 or 4, but it didn't, because I think you would have to say Abraham Lincoln and his followers changed everything. If you go back to 2 Chronicles 7 and verse 14, it says, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways. If people today read that, I just not so long ago heard people quote that, but they left out the part, turn from their wicked ways. Is it possible we are saturated in wicked ways? This is a prophecy from the last book of the Old Testament. He said, then will I hear from heaven, if you'll do turning there, and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. I'll heal their land. Think about it. The reality today, are we, sometimes the people are talking about a civil war more and more in America and even in Britain. And they are deeply divided. And yet, look at the result that Lincoln got from God for taking this to God and encouraging a lot of people to do it, speaking out publicly about the problem. And look what it did. God healed this land. He healed it, just like He said He would. And so we need to think about all these things and these really wonderful promises that God makes to us, and especially about healing our land. If we'll just turn, we'll hear what God says to us, He will heal our land. How wonderful it is to have that promise from God. Until next week, this is Gerald Flurry. Goodbye, friends.
All our literature is available free of charge at no cost or obligation to you. Request Character in Crisis and Conspiracy Against Fatherhood. Search online for the Modern Romans. Order now. The preceding program was a paid presentation of The Key of David, brought to you by the Philadelphia Church of God.